needed to move New Jersey forward as well as understand the impact any state legislation will have on our residents and local governments. Among his greatest contributions has been championing efforts to protect nature, preserve open space, and promote a healthier environment. We know Senator McKeon is working hard to make the Garden State better for us all, both in the present and for future generations. Thank you for standing by our side and joining with us to continue putting Essex County first. Senator Renee Burgess sends her regrets because she's holding it down on the committee. I want to ask Assemblywoman Shanique Spate to join me, and I don't know if there's anybody else, just so we can take a photo and congratulate you. Mike Venezia, are you here? No, we just called out that he left. He still loves you though, Senator McKeon. On behalf of County Executive Joseph N. DiVincenzo Jr., congratulations, best wishes, and thank you for being part of the team.
You know, I feel like I should be in a box up here or something like that. Gosh, it's just incredibly kind, each and every person. You know, first off, thank you to the county executive, Joe. I know nothing happens unless you say it does, and so I'm here thanks to you today, and I appreciate that very much. I respect you so much, and I'm so happy about what we'll be able to accomplish together in the future in a great partnership. And of course, to all the commissioners, Lenny and all, thank you as well. To the sheriff, I really appreciate it. I need that PBA card, as you know, very, very much. And to all of the elected officials. You know, obviously, Senator Ruiz and Senator Renee and Brittany Timberlake, Senator Timberlake, you know, the four of us now together, you know, have created a bond that Essex is going to speak in one voice, and that will remain the same. And now the three of them pick on me, like I am the older brother now for sure, and they just pick on me incessantly. So we're going to need just, you saw it here for a little while, but it really is truly an honor. And all of my colleagues in the Assembly, I said when I left that my heart would always be there, notwithstanding that I was going to the Senate. And you understated it as far as me looking to you as a daughter. You know how much I care about you and how much I respect you. Mother of three now. My staff is here. You know, Alex, Chris, and Julian. All of you are great public servants, like so many of you, you know, here today. You know, my 30 years ago, I am a trial attorney, and I was in this courthouse, and my mother and my Aunt Janet showed up to watch what was going on, if you can imagine. Well, you know the commercial about how you turn into your parents? So my youngest daughter, Jackie, is on trial before Judge Spencer, as a matter of fact. And Ann and I are going over with cameras later to see if Kathy, I'm humbled, you know, to be here with you. I read more about you than I had already known. It's amazing. She leads an army, literally, of 110 individuals that are a part of your staff, and I think you've been there for like 15 or 20 years, and executive director for at least 10. And it's like you lead a crusade for social justice every day of your life. What an admired life that you are, and I'll always be humbled to have been up here with you. Speaking of humble, right? Irish Person of the Year in Essex County, of all places. You know, I stand on the shoulders of Brendan Byrne, of the Cryans, of the Durkins, you know, of the Giblins. And I thought a little bit about, you know, what we celebrate in our Irish culture and what an impact the Irish have had here in our country. And it's not just on the sheer numbers. There's about 4.5 million people live in Ireland. Here in our country, there's close to 40 million that trace their roots in Irish heritage to Ireland. That's amazing just in sheer numbers. It all actually happened back in Columbus's day, and this is a historical fact. He first went to Ireland. You know, the Irish said he stopped over to ask for directions. But he, in fact, picked up a young man who was, Pat McGuire, who was one of the first persons to step on shore as it related to that part of our history. George Washington, as we know, most of his troops, or a good portion, were of Irish heritage. There were 20 Irish Americans who were generals. The first general ever lost his life was Irish. His name was Montgomery in the Revolutionary War. Commodore Barry, an Irish American, was the father of our Navy. You remember the Alamo? Davy Crockett, Jim Huey, and Bill Travers were all stubborn Irishmen. And Abraham Lincoln, at the Civil War, when he created the Congressional Medal of Honor to honor the war heroes, by far the largest group that was bestowed that honor were Irish Americans. Artie Murphy was the most decorated soldier in World War II, an Irishman. The Mark and Scott Kelly, I like to think of my own beautiful town, West Orange, the two of them who went on to fight heroically in the Gulf War, and then commanded the space shuttle, and one of them is now in the U.S. Senate. Politics, my gosh, the first female governor was out of the state of Wyoming, Nellie Taylor Ross, an Irish American. Presidents, right? You think of Kennedy and Reagan and Biden. 23 presidents in the United States trace their roots in Irish heritage. And it's fitting, right, that after the end of the War of 1812, when the White House burned down, that an Irish architect, James Tobin, actually designed what we see today. You think of literature, anybody from, Edgar Allan Poe to Stephen King. Entertainment, I'll just mention one name, Walt Disney. He's had a little bit of an impact, right? Whether it's, teachers, nurses, law enforcement, fire service, the clergy, all synonymous with greatness in our country. But I do want to take a moment to tell you about one immigrant. His name was John Francis Xavier McKeon. He wasn't yet a senior, and he certainly didn't know he was going to have a grandson named John one day. But there were reasons why people left Ireland. Some of them had related to the Great Famine that you're all familiar with. Others to come over to try to make a better life as the Industrial Revolution welcomed migrants to our shores. And then there were others like his mother, who left out of shame because he was born out of wedlock. And at age 2, he and his mom, Ann McNulty, came over here, came to Newark. Sadly, and I think of my granddaughter, it brings, I could well up thinking about it, he was just 3 when his mother died. And he was here alone. He was raised in an orphanage in Vailsburg, in Newark. Graduated back then, I guess it was what you could do from the 8th grade. Went to work at the Monroe factory in Orange, where he met my grandmother, and by 18, they were married. Now, here's the part that gets a little tricky. You'll appreciate this, Phil. My grandmother was Alba Zeppi. So now that doesn't count. This is my dad's side. On my mom's side, my mom from Montclair, she was a Monzo. So if you're keeping score at home, I'm about 3/4 Italian from a perspective of bloodlines. But my grandfather, when married my grandmother Alba, and she was one of 8. And her sisters married into the Ruggiero family and the Fiscarellis, and to the Panfiellos, and to the Petrosellis. But he was always the Irish uncle. Hey, they were all very proud of this Irish uncle. And that made me the Irish cousin. And so bloodlines aside, that was always our role, within the family. And certainly in my public life back when it meant more, Joe, right? I was the Irish candidate in West Orange. Right? You would never think of it that way now, right, Phil? But it was a little bit of a different time, already 30 years ago. In any event, what I can tell you about my grandfather is this, and getting back to history, right? William Randolph Hearst, who we all know, right? The empire of publishing. He built Hearst Castle. Well, my grandfather got a loan from his brother-in-law, Mikey, who made some money during Prohibition. That's a story for another time. And he bought a 3-family house in the city of Orange on 127 Summer Street. I couldn't even say, a postage stamp. You could maybe play ping pong on the front lawn of this three-family house. But my grandfather kept that lawn. It wasn't Hearst Castle, but to him it was like the 18th green at the Masters. And when all the Italian cousins came over into the backyard for whatever birthday party it might have been, they'd admire the beautiful paint job on that house. So there were no stars that came to Hearst Castle, it was just family. To McKeon's castle, but it meant no less to him, and he took no less pride. Henry Ford, another Irish American, right, changed the world as it relates to creating the great Ford Empire. There's some who will argue that the United States was able to win with the Allies World War II because of being able to garner up with munitions and other kind of equipment from the Ford factories. My grandfather was a maintenance man at the First National Bank. He worked as a school janitor at a school in Orange and was at the print shop at Seton Hall. He wasn't quite Henry Ford, but I can tell you that when it came to making sure the sidewalks in front of that school were perfect when it snowed, he was there. He took me with him. And that print shop in Seton Hall, other than his ink-stained hands, nowhere else. So I remember the story, and Chris, you mentioned Muhlenberg College. So my grandfather would come to my football games back in college, and everybody else would leave, and he'd wait for me to come out of the locker room, and he'd say, "Don't worry, they probably would have lost anyway, even if you didn't fumble." And we'd always have a nice walk back toward the dorms together, and we're cutting through a building, and there was a custodian. And he was mopping in floors and doing that kind of work. And my grandfather stops and has literally a 10-minute conversation with him about how they work, what do they do to strip wax, how does this happen. And I was impatient and come on, let's go. I want to get back to our friends and the rest of our family. And so as soon as I was able to break him away, he grabbed me and said, "What are they teaching you in that school?" I said, "He doesn't even know who you are." He said to me, "You can't do anything greater than something for someone who really doesn't even know your name, who will now go home to his family or in his own mind and understand that someone recognized what it is that he does as important." So my grandfather was no Joe Kennedy, but he certainly inspired me, and like many of you here, that public service is a noble thing to do, and that there's no better calling than to be able to make a difference in people's lives, people who will never know most any of our names. So to me, it's not a celebration of me today, but it's the values of Irish American culture, and that are relatively universal. Hard work, pride, loyalty, and love of family. I'm again humbled by all of this. God bless you all, and thank you.
John missed a few